Welcome to the next podcast of Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. Thank you for joining me for this episode today with Belinda Osborne, the designer and milliner behind the label Peacock Millinery. Belinda is an award-winning milliner, having just won the Myer VRC Flemington Fashions on Your Front Lawn Award this year. Thank you to our wonderful podcast sponsors for making this episode possible: Be Unique Millinery, House of Adorn, The Essential Hat, Bat Millinery, Hatter's Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Laco, Hat Mags, Marie D'Antoni Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, Millinery Australia, and Judith M. Millinery Supply House. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes, either through your podcast app or our website. If you've been enjoying listening to this podcast series, I'd like to invite you to show your support through becoming a Patreon. There are 2 tiers available: a podcast sponsor, where we can support and promote your business to our audience, or a supporter level for those who would like to show their support so we can keep producing the content you hear and see on Millinery.Info. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Belinda. I apologise for any technical glitches you may hear in the audio. When I was recording this with Belinda, she's located in the far north of Australia, up in Darwin, so the internet is not quite as strong as it is in all locations, but I hope that you get the essence of our chat and it doesn't interrupt your experience too much. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy hearing Belinda speak. Thank you so much today for joining me today, Belinda, to talk hats and your award-winning piece. Congratulations on winning the Myer Fashions on the Field Millinery Award this year. Your piece is absolutely stunning. Could you start by telling us a little bit about it?
Thanks, Lauren. It's a piece that I sort of have had in my mind for probably about close to 4 months prior to the award, it just came from a little sample piece, so I knew I wanted to make something that involved this feather lattice. And as the competition got closer and was announced, I started thinking about in what context did I want to use the feather lattice, and I started reflecting on all the feelings of confinement and restrictions from the COVID lockdowns and the border closures and the lockouts and lock-ins and all of that that we've all experienced over the past 18 months. And I really wanted my piece to make a statement about that feeling that we've been caged in, per se. So that was what I wanted to sort of my design vision was for it to be.
And there's so much intricate detail in it. I mean, you mentioned the lattice, but I've watched the video. If anyone's interested in going to see your making video, it was such a process. Could you tell us a little bit about what went into the making of it?
Yeah. The making of it was actually really quite relaxing. Normally, normally it can be, as you know, as an entrant yourself, normally it can be really stressful trying to work through new techniques and expanding your design prowess for the competition. And I just sort of thought that in the beginning I was thinking, oh, this is gonna be a nightmare, but it actually was just so repetitive that it was just really relaxing. It was almost like a de-stressor. So it was just measure cut, and then once I had cut out all the feathers, it was just the process of, once I knew exactly what pattern to lay the feathers in so that I got the particular design of the colours, then it was just a matter of just off you go and just repeat action. Yeah.
And how many feathers did you cut for that process?
So in all, I calculated. So it wasn't so much. I didn't calculate actually how many feathers I used this time. Normally I do, but what I did calculate was I calculated how many little bits I needed to cut, and that was about 456 pieces by my calculation. So I, yeah. So when I'm quite I work inside my mind a lot when I'm doing other millinery jobs, and it gets to the the hand stitching stage where you aren't thinking so much, you're just sort of on that autopilot. Um, my mind goes off into design mode for other hats, and I start thinking about how is the construction going to be for that? What are the bones of it going to be? What sort of measurements? How many am I going to need? And that's what I was doing with this piece. Was whilst I was trying to finish all of my custom orders for spring, I needed to get those done before I started my competition piece, because obviously being a couture milliner, my clients are key. And so I had about 3 days left before the deadline, and I had already figured most of it in my head. I was like, right, because I'm not near any supply shops at all whatsoever, so I needed to figure out if I had the stock, um, how many feathers would I need, and roughly that would be good. So I did all of that. I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I didn't need any stocks, and thank goodness it was in the colours that I wanted it to be in, that I had in stock as well. So it just worked out perfectly. Yeah.
It was such a beautiful color way which you used. Was that influenced by the stock you already had or other elements?
Well, I have obviously I do a lot of work with feathers, so I've got hundreds of different types of feathers on hand at any one time. But the particular color palette that I chose for my design was reflective of two aspects. In one, it was what I was seeing as I was driving in and out of my property every day. The white Maria flowers and the lilac flowers from my Pride of India tree that's flowering at the moment. It looks sensational. And then when you go up close to it, there's new growth that's really crisp and limey almost. And then it's also covered in green ants, which are these iridescent orangey and bright little green bums. And so those are the colors that I really sort of adored. And then also twofold is that they are what I forecasted the colors of spring to be. So being in Darwin, I have two springs, I like to say. We have our dry season, we have the dry season and the wet season, only two seasons here. So whereas in the southern states, you have the four seasons. But our carnival runs in dry season, which is July. And so that's the opposite to you guys. So I like to say I'm a lucky milliner that has two spring seasons. I had a lot of clients who were coming in with mandarins, tangerine, oranges, beautiful fresh greens and chartreuse greens and things like that. And I was like, I really need to use those two colours in my whatever I make for my spring. I need those in my colours. And then as the Darwin Carnival finished and I started going into Southern Spring, I started seeing the fashion designers, like the By Johnnies and a lot of the designers down south actually bringing out oranges and greens, and and I was like, oh yes, this is exactly where we're heading, and it's just so fresh, I think, and it's just to be spring. It's spring basically, so that's what we.
And you have such a vibrant palette that you work within, and it really came through in that piece. The technique that you used, had you explored that much before, or this was kind of the first foray into that?
No, no. See, I'm a creature of mini explores, I suppose, is what you could say. So I have a shelf, or a couple of shelves in my studio. They're my secret shelves, um, and they hold all of the mini explorations, I suppose you could call it. So on this shelf is just little bits of an idea, and that's where the feather ladder sat for about 4 months prior. So just before Carnival, before Darwin Cup Carnival, I had made it from some remnants that I had been making from another lady's hats, and they sort of just fell on the table, and I sort of was like, oh, that looks cool. And I worked and played with it a bit and figured out how to actually do it, and get them to sort of like really stick together and become actually quite strong. So so I did about, probably a section that's would have been about 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, about 3 by 3 rows, and it just sat on my little shelf of goodies, and it just kept hooing at me, I suppose, is what you could say. It just every time I looked at it, it was like, here I am. So I just knew I really had to make something amazing from it, because I just couldn't walk past that shelf and not see it amongst all the other things. Yeah.
I think, and the shape that you formed was such an interesting shape. Had you made one that had done that before, or that just naturally seemed like the answer to what you were looking for?
No, so in the beginning, I really like pieces that embody dimensional art and dimensional perspective. So, giving a whole 360-degree experience to the wearer and the onlooker. So I knew I needed to take this little sample, which was like sitting in the two-dimensional space at that moment in time. It was just this flat little thing, and I was like, oh, I really need to wrap it around. That's where I wanted to head. So in the beginning, when I started making it, I was like, yeah, this could be really cool to do some sort of, either halo or like wraparound spiral or something like that. And then as the competition got closer, I started thinking about the silhouette of the shape that I wanted to do for the competition, and I started thinking along the lines of that being confined, and but what is a beautiful way of confining, and what is, I suppose, in the sense of millinery, bows are quite seen as beautiful, pretty, that's feminine. So that was really where I headed with that. It's like, okay, what I need to do is I need to make an amazing big ribbon, and make this feather lattice into an actual bow. So step one, make a giant ribbon and make it look like it's this amazing bow that's confined, the model. Yeah.
Amazing.
But no, I hadn't actually made it. Had made any any shape of that before. No.
And I think what was interesting, because my piece, we don't know it. Well, of course we know each other, but we don't compare work. We work in a similar space. But when you looked at the two out, yours and my piece next together, it was interesting to see the similarities that occurred. But by no means were we comparing notes or looking to
Lauren,
each other's work. It was so interesting.
I listen, when I saw your piece, because when I first started thinking about what I wanted the design to be, my concept was pretty much what yours had been. And I said to my son, he came into the studio, and I said to him, oh, do you I drew up the thing. I'm like, oh, do you like this? He's like, yeah, I like that, what have you. And then when I made it, and I put the actual big bow part on, I was like, oh, yeah, that looks good now. And he's like, oh, I think I like the other way. And I was like, no, don't say that. You're supposed to say, yes, Mum, that looks awesome.
What a good support. Yeah, I think it was a very interesting reflection of like the zeitgeist, and the themes that came throughout all of the other entries as well had similar tones to it. But it was just fascinating to see we'd worked completely independently, and then to see what resulted in similar, not the same, but similar aesthetics was amazing.
Yeah. I think people I often find that happens a lot in certain spaces. Is that with what's going on in the world, when so many people are experiencing a particular emotion or experience or goings on, political, anything, um, we can all have very similar feelings, and we all take that on board to, especially if you're a creative, if you're a maker, if you're producing things, you're going to put that into what you produce. So it's quite interesting that you say that, because I see it so often, and a lot of the time I'll be either halfway making through something, and then someone will put a picture up, and I'll be like, oh no, damn, they put a picture up of something that I was practically just making. So it's like, here we go, change it again. So it's, you got to beat the people to it when it comes to getting into trends or producing things sometimes.
Yeah. And because you get 2 springs, do you design a particular collection, or how do you work in your workspace? Is it a constant flow of different pieces? What's your...
Yeah, no, it's I love when people say to me, "Oh, what's your design style?" And I say eclectic. It's like it's I make what I want, pretty much. So although a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, no, I can definitely tell a Peacock Millinery piece walking out on the track," and I'm like, "Oh, can you? That's lovely." But I sort of yeah, I'm like. That's great. But it's interesting because I see so much difference in all my pieces. They like they differ. I suppose it would be very similar if we're a parent of twins. You're going to see those differences more than other people see the differences. To other people, they just look like the same, but to you, they're like, no, they're completely different. So I think that's probably a really good analogy for how I work. Is that I feel each one of them is so different, and because I've predominantly been a couture milliner and working with clients, you're dealing with their needs. So being the designer is the number one thing that you want to do, and of course, always come in with your brand and your style and your design. But when you're couturing, you've got to take in account of what a client has, and what their needs are, what their likes are. They need to feel comfortable in it. But as far as what else I produce, is that yes, I do produce a very small ready-to-wear collection, and but now that I've actually gone some time into millinery, I'm looking to expand, and hopefully I have more time to spend on actually making millinery now, and then I'll be able to.
So your clients at the moment, will they have a completely custom made piece, or are they picking a design and then saying, oh, but my dress is these colorways, can we do it in these tones? How does it work with them?
Yeah, so I have two sets of customers, and well, I have the three. One will buy the ready to wear, and then so I have the made to order customer, which they see something that somebody else has had made for them. They see one of the other designs that I've made, and they say, "I'll have that," and then we change the color, or we modify it ever so slightly. And then I have my custom clients. So these are clients that want something that, they've got a dress, and it's got a specific print or a pattern, and they maybe want to take that up into the hat to create a completely cohesive look for it. So it's interesting because when it comes to custom orders, one of my clients in Darwin, she's been a client for many years now, and she was actually our NT representative. And I don't know what it is about her hats, but every year I get numerous requests to remake her hat. So I custom design the hat for my client, and
Yes.
Hannah, and she she then gets all these phone calls from because obviously we're before the spring, so then she gets all the phone calls from the spring people, or the messages these days. Asking, do you want to sell? Do you want to sell? And then they message me like, oh, we want to buy. So it's interesting. She seems to be quite amused for the made to order pieces. Yeah.
It's amazing, and it sounds like such an amazing partnership between the two of you, that you produce an aesthetic that is so on trend and ahead of the trend, in fact, that people are looking to then follow it.
She's really she's probably the best. Well, I've got a lot of amazing, awesome clients, and I couldn't ask for anything better, because when it comes to, as you know, being a designer, free reign is just where it's at. If they just come in and they say, most of the time I just get a dress dropped off, and they're like, oh yeah, this is the dress, thanks, these are the shoes, this is the bag, or what have you. And I'm like, yep, beauty, I'll see you in 6 weeks. It's like, so that's it. And they trust me to the T, and they have done for years. So obviously when I take on a new client, they haven't built up that trust. So it's more, reassuring them that, yes, it's going to be okay. You're definitely going to get a hat to wear. Gonna look awesome.
You can trust me with full reign of your headpiece.
Yeah, that's it. So I love it.
It's amazing. And you're based up in Darwin, which is for those not in Australia, the Northern Territory of Australia. It's a very unique climate as well, but also very isolated, you could describe it, from the main CBD cities that people might be familiar with, like Sydney and Melbourne. How did you come to be a milliner?
Yeah, so I'm a rare breed. I'm a Darwin born and bred person. So for my age, that's everyone goes, oh, really? So it's a little small town, sort of in the top of, it's the capital of the outback, or Alice Springs they say is, but up the top end of Australia is where the crocodiles and the kangaroos and all that sort of stuff are. But yeah, we've had the Darwin Cup here for 9 years now. So, I mean, we've had horse racing here for forever, it feels like. And I went to my first races in 1999, and I ended up making my own hat. And from there, sort of stemmed off this bit of a love for it, I suppose. So around mid-2000s, I started selling a few to friends and family and things like that. And it sort of just grew from there pretty much. And then I found out that my mum, my mum lived in Darwin as well. Which was great, because I actually found out that she was a milliner for Myer and Miller Andersons in South Australia, which is, if you're not aware of those big department stores, and it was back in the 50s and the 60s when all the milliners would work out the back on these giant long tables, and they would sit around the tables and they would make the hat, and then they would, once it was finished, they would take it out onto the floor, and then the shop people would sell the hat off the floor. And I was like, how did I not know this? Because basically just said, oh, are you making hats? And I said, yeah, and there's a whole part of my mum's life I felt like I didn't even know about. And I was like, yeah. She goes, oh gosh, I was a milliner. I was like, you're kidding. Like,
just passed over that. Didn't even register.
Well, yeah, it was literally like I didn't know her life, much of her life prior to her moving to Darwin in the early 70s. So that's quite interesting. And then of course they went through the cyclone, huge cyclone Tracy up here in 79. So they didn't really have many possessions left. So there wasn't any hat paraphernalia around the house for me to go, oh, what's that? Type of thing. So it literally just came out of the blue. And I was like so shocked. I thought, this is just so bizarre that what's such a niche little industry I've gotten into, my mum was in. Like, that's just crazy. So around 2006, she started, teaching me more like fundamental pattern making, things like that. And passed away in 2009, and I still thought, oh, I need to learn more. So in 2010, I went to my first ever convention. So at RMIT Melbourne. So it was an eye-opening experience. Absolutely amazing. I'd come from Darwin, where there's nothing, and there was just people learning hats everywhere, and it was just amazing. It was such an experience. I bought my first set of hat blocks there, a set of 4 button blocks and a dome. Prior to that, the 4 years that I had been actually like making hats, I had not used a block at all. It was all wire, buckram, lino, or whatever, and fabric covers. So the whole new world opened up to me, and I was just like, oh, this is sensational. So yeah, I think she'd be really, really proud of how I've gone over the years, and
Incredibly
that I'm
proud.
actually and doing it full time now. I think she'd just be like beaming.
That's amazing. And when did you take the plunge to full-time millinery?
So last year, I decided to make Peacock Millinery into a company and actually take it to the next level, to expand the business, and and hopefully things like great job, Belinda, doing that.
Good
and
timing.
COVID hits.
Yeah.
It was like, right. Is something telling me something? So I was like, no, this is it. This is what you want to do. So just keep moving forward. And I was actually really shocked. At one stage there, I felt I felt really guilty. This is probably going to sound really strange and really weird, because when COVID hit, and a lot of the southern states went into lockdown, Darwin did not go into lockdown. So we were locked out of everywhere, and we locked other people out. So we were trapped in the NT per se, but we weren't locked in our homes like other people were. And what ended up happening was I actually had a really good year. And we had a small Darwin Cup carnival, but I was still super busy.
Amazing.
And I still had interstate orders coming in from WA and Queensland and New South Wales, and I just couldn't thank them enough, really, because I just sort of felt like, I felt so. It was a really strange, odd feeling that I was feeling a bit guilty that I was working and others were, not. And it was just really, I suppose it was a really interesting feeling on me. I'd never sort of felt that before. And then when it continued to go on, and everybody started pivoting, I was like, oh yeah, I want to pivot too. I want to do other things too. And I literally couldn't. I was so busy with race hats, and everybody was making these, like, getting inspiration to make summer things, and beautiful bucket hats and masks, and no one wanted face masks in Darwin. Like, it was it was so crazy.
And such a strange time, but to be able to still have Darwin Cup in the way that you did is incredible.
Yeah, to have basically the whole nation watching the Darwin Cup was like, yeah.
Well, you were the only race carnival happening basically for 2 years nearly.
It pretty much felt like that. It felt like you couldn't go to the races in, like, Ascot had been cancelled over in the UK. You couldn't couldn't go on track there. You couldn't go on track down south. You couldn't go on track anywhere. And here we were in little old Darwin town with our, I think it was 5,000 limit capacity that could attend the Darwin Cup. We felt very, very, very lucky to be able to go to that. Yeah.
And your pieces have just been popping up everywhere, including the campaigns for the Darwin Cup Carnival, which is amazing. How do you decide do you make specifically for that, or are they picking from pieces you've already got? How does that work?
I've been involved with the Darwin Cup Carnival campaign for many years now. I love to support my local track. I'm a big supporter of Darwin Turf Club. So they have the Darwin Cup Carnival Ambassador program up here, where they pick they pick somebody from a local, and they basically get that person to support local business and local industry, so local designers, dress designers, local boutiques, local milliners, and things like that. So in the past, it's just been made to order, like couture, basically custom pieces, because they really sort of want to promote that aspect of it. But it is quite difficult because it's a very, very busy time of the year for myself. So last year and the year before, it was a mixture of ready to wear and custom pieces. So there's a couple of days up here that are a must do if you're going to do the carnival. It's the Ladies' Day and the Darwin Cup Day. They are 2 weeks apart, unfortunately, but they are just the best days. They are sensational. The fashion up here is next level. I don't know what it is about the Darwin fashion. I think we always say it's just because we just don't have as many events down south or what have you, but it's just sensational time, and to support that and to support the that side industry of racing, which is fashion and tourism and everything that goes along with it as well, and to have the club support that it's just fantastic. Yeah.
You make in a studio space. How do you have that set up? What does your space look like?
Yeah, so my space is it's a beautiful little studio bungalow type of thing, I suppose is what you could call it, and it's about 3 meters wide by approximately 6 meters long, and that's my space. That's my workspace. I have 2 main working stations. So I have a sit-down working station, which is a nice big wide desk, and then I have a stand-up workstation as well, so that I can do a lot of blocking, and I do like to sew at the stand-up station as well, and that. But yeah, so it's a beautiful space. I'm actually currently packing it up because we've decided to sell our property. We've lived in the rural area for a long time, so we've had a very, very large property. Just decided that we would like to downsize and move into a little bit closer to town. So I'll be looking for a new house with a new studio soon.
So exciting. And
It
you're
is.
working in your business full time. Do you have a structure for how you have your week, or it's quite dependent on what's coming up?
It is quite dependent on what's coming up. I have in season and out season, and then I have usually when it comes to Darwin Cup Carnival, I have a 2-week period, which is the just the red zone for which is the 2 weeks prior to Ladies' Day. So my biggest day of the year is Darwin Cup Carnival Ladies' Day, and that's where a majority of my orders, I'll do 60 orders for that day. It's a massive day. So basically have outer season where I'm just working on ready to wear and pieces to set up for made to order, so that you can get a bit of a head start when times start to get a little bit pressed. And then in season is usually because people don't know what they want, especially when it comes to custom orders. They won't know what they want until they get an outfit and so forth. So I have people that book and pay for their spot 2 months in advance, and so most of the time I'm 6 months in advance booked out, and so they'll book their spot and then they'll go and they'll get their outfit knowing that their spot is secured, and then I can contact them sort of 6 weeks out from their booking space and go, righto, need your outfit, so that we can get things happening. And then there's the red zone, as I call it, which is 2 weeks before Ladies' Day, and that is basically 10-hour days, a 2-week period. It's a massive time of just trying to get everything done as much as you possibly can, because I find it hard to say no to people. I just keep squeezing people in until I can't do it anymore.
But it sounds like you have a good structure. You have an idea of how many people you can service, for lack of a better word, and be able to fit into your schedule.
Yeah.
Amazing. And what's an upcoming project you're looking forward to working on?
My next upcoming project is working on my 2022 ready to wear collection. So that'll be released possibly around May. So I'll be looking at that. I don't do too much with winter wear, of course, being the fact that we have no winter. But I do get requests from clients who want custom winter pieces. But I'm sort of a creature of habit, and I like to say, do what you do well. So I'm not a leather milliner. I'm not really a suede or it's not what I do. And you just got to know who you are, know your brand, and then know who your client is, your audience. So you're gonna then be able to really work better, as opposed to just spreading yourself too thin. Because at the moment I've got so much spring throughout the whole year. It's literally spring summer for me, and so I don't feel it necessary to make the items. So it's one of those things.
Also, wouldn't need to wear a felt unless you're coming to visit us, maybe down in Melbourne. So I can see why there's no felt making.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, no, I'd like to get into it and do it more and offer it more. But I get orders for, like I say, spring summer hats from February all the way through to November. So it's very hard to sort of fit in something when my constant line is pretty much spring racewear. And I enjoy it. I don't mind it at all.
That's fantastic. And you do you attend the track yourself still, having first found this through going to the races?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually a horse owner. I own a few horses, and I am involved in the Women in Race thoroughbred racing, Darwin NT, and so I go to the track and have lunch there and watch the races and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Wear a hat.
Wear a hat? Oh, I'm always you are your biggest billboard, is what I definitely say. So whereas years ago I was wearing far more extravagant hats, only because in Darwin we didn't have the extravagant factor. So I was trying to introduce that and say, yes, look at this. This is what you can wear, So be your own billboard. So now I'm like, okay, it might not be a big carnival day. It's a small race day, this is what you can wear to a small race day, but still wear something.
Absolutely. Because if people don't see it, they don't know it's a possibility.
That's exactly right.
It has been so wonderful to talk hats with you today, Belinda, and to hear about your wonderful award-winning piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Millinery.Info with Belinda. I'd like to thank our Patreon podcast sponsors for making this episode possible. Be Unique Millinery, House of Adorn, The Essential Hat, That Millinery, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, Marie D'Antoni Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, Millinery Australia, and Judith M. Millinery Supply House. You can find a link to each of their businesses in our show notes, either through your podcast app or our website. We're very appreciative of our podcast sponsors' support. If you'd like to become a Patreon of Millinery.Info, there are 2 tiers available. You could become a podcast sponsor, which means your business or event is mentioned in our podcast site and in the monthly newsletter. This starts from just $15 per month. We also have a supporter tier, which starts from just $5. It's like a little more than shouting us a coffee per month to say thank you for the content that you hear on Millinery.Info. If you have any questions about becoming a patron, I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, head over to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. Thank you for joining me for this episode, and I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.